Prophecy. There are moments when the world grows too quiet, not with peace, but with the eerie stillness that comes before a storm. Lately, I've been living in that quiet. Maybe you have too. Wars break out in places we used to pray for and then forget. Technologies we once saw only in science fiction now sit in our homes, in our pockets, in our eyes. We speak commands and machines obey. We ask questions and artificial minds answer. We wage battles not just with weapons, but with data, with algorithms, with silence. Something deep in me stirs. A whisper, persistent. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady, like the turning of a page I didn't mean to read. And I wonder, are we entering something foretold? I'm not a prophet. I'm not a scholar. I'm just someone who sees patterns where once there was only noise. I see the tension in people's eyes that scroll endlessly, that flinch at every headline, that don't sleep as easily as they used to. I see the hunger for truth in a world that floods us with information, but rarely with wisdom. Sometimes, I open the book of Revelation and read words written thousands of years ago, and they feel less like ancient warnings and more like present-tense descriptions. Not everything makes sense. Some parts feel like riddles and fire and smoke. Others, like someone crying from a distant rooftop in the middle of the night, begging the world to wake up. And maybe we should, because something is shifting, and I can't shake the feeling that prophecy is no longer a distant word buried in parchment, but a breath in the air around us. What event do you believe the world still doesn't expect, but the Bible already warned us about? Echoes from Revelation. The book of Revelation has always felt like a storm trapped between pages. When I was younger, I avoided it. Too strange, too violent, too symbolic. Dragons, beasts, horns, bowls of wrath for horsemen, fire falling from the sky. It felt like the fever dream of a madman, or a vision too holy for this world to understand. But over time, I've come to see that Revelation is not madness. It's a mirror. It shows us what we ignore, what we suppress, what waits in the shadows when we convince ourselves that history only moves forward. It doesn't just speak in metaphors. It speaks in warnings, in promises, sometimes both in the same breath. Some read it literally, a countdown, a play-by-play of what's coming. Others read it symbolically, a spiritual map of the battles that happen in every era, in every soul. I don't claim to have the answer, but I do know this. Revelation wasn't written to be deciphered like a code. It was written to be felt, to awaken something. And then there's the moment, the one that always stops me. Revelation chapter 9, the vision of a great army. Not 10,000, not 100,000, but 200 million. Riders pouring out like smoke. Their horses breathing fire and sulfur. A third of mankind perishes in their wake. 200 million. When John wrote those words, the world had never seen anything like it. The Roman Empire didn't even have 1 million soldiers. The number was inconceivable, so massive it felt almost mythical. But now the world feels capable of such a thing. Is it meant to be literal? A future war with numbers that only technology could summon? Or is it meant to shake us awake, to show us the scale of spiritual conflict we cannot see? Sometimes, I wonder what John really saw on that island of Patmos. Maybe it was fire. Maybe it was code. Maybe it was something even deeper. Whatever it was, it echoes still. The unseen army. 200 million. It's a number so large, our minds can't truly grasp it. Say it out loud, and it still feels unreal. 200 million warriors. Not just soldiers. Riders. Forces of judgment. Carriers of smoke, fire, and sulfur. Was John describing an actual army? Or something far more terrifying, an invisible one? We live in a world obsessed with visibility. Likes, views, data points. We measure everything we can see. But Revelation pulls back the curtain on what we can't. What if that number, 200 million, was never meant to describe an army we'd witness with our eyes, but one we'd feel with our souls? Think about it. The fear that grips a generation. The confusion that clouds our choices. The moral numbness spreading like smoke. The pressure to conform, to give in, to give up. Forces we can't name, but we all feel them. We fight battles every day that never make the news. Quiet wars of the heart. Silent invasions of our peace. There is an army, not with swords or bullets, but with lies, with shame, with distraction. 200 million voices that whisper, "You're alone. There's no meaning. Hope is naive. Sometimes I wonder if that's the real war. And then there are moments when I sense it. The presence of something ancient, something watching, not with hatred, but hunger, as if we're all being pulled, slowly, towards something. It's easy to believe in angels. It's harder to admit we may also be surrounded by things that want to devour us from within. And maybe that's why Revelation doesn't name every force. Maybe it's not about dragons or monsters. Maybe it's about influence, about systems, about ideologies, about the slow corrosion of truth beneath the surface of a beautiful world. If there is an unseen army, it isn't just waiting to attack. It's already here. Machines without souls. There's a moment, just a heartbeat, when a machine pulls the trigger. No heartbeat on the other side. No pause. No doubt. No soul. And that moment haunts me. Because for the first time in history, war is no longer a human decision. It's a calculation. Drones fly with eyes that do not blink. Missiles seek heat, not guilt. Algorithms scan for threats, but never ask if they should fire. Only when. What happens when weapons no longer need permission? What happens when the battlefield is populated not by soldiers, but by circuits? We're told it's safer, cleaner, more efficient, less human loss. But is it? Or are we just removing the one fragile thing that once held war back, conscience? The book of Revelation speaks of a time when destruction comes like smoke from the abyss. Riders with breastplates of fire and brimstone. Creatures that look like war, but are not fully of this world. For centuries, readers tried to picture them, monsters, demons, literal beasts. But now I wonder, what if John saw something more familiar? What if the fire and smoke were exhaust trails? What if the sulfur was scorched circuitry? What if the creatures weren't demons, but drones? We've created machines that can kill without compassion, that do not pray, that do not mourn, that do not hear a voice crying, "Don't shoot." And we've done it in the name of progress. But if machines make life and death decisions, who carries the blame? Who answers when a child is mistaken for a threat? When a wedding becomes a target? The machine? The code? The creator? There's no trial for an algorithm, no confession from a drone, no soul to search for repentance. And maybe that's what makes this era so dangerous. Not the machines themselves, but the speed at which we hand them our power, our judgment, our war, our peace. Revelation warned of judgment without mercy, fire without end. And today we edge closer, not through prophecy fulfilled by fate, but by choice. Because we made them. And we're letting them decide what we were never meant to surrender. The question now is not whether they can think. It's whether we still can. When faith meets technology. There was a time when the sacred lived in silence, in the space between breaths, in churches, in scriptures, in whispered prayers behind closed doors. But now, the sacred scrolls through screens. We swipe, we type, we upload. And somewhere along the way, the language of worship was replaced with the language of code. I'm not against progress. I'm speaking into a machine right now. You're hearing this through wires and signals and invisible data flowing through space. But something in me still asks, what have we lost? Faith is not a system. It doesn't run on logic. It doesn't compute. It believes in things unseen. It waits. It hopes. It trusts in what cannot be proven. But the world we've built is allergic to mystery. We want answers. Instant ones. Clean, efficient, data-driven solutions. Even for the soul. We ask AI to write our stories, solve our conflicts, predict our futures. We want machines to do what prophets once did. And yet, machines do not pray. They don't kneel when overwhelmed. They don't repent when they're wrong. They don't stand in awe of the sky or break at the sound of a sacred name. What happens when belief and technology collide? When ancient truth meets artificial wisdom? When we try to quantify the divine? The tension inside me grows. I carry a Bible in one hand and a smartphone in the other. One speaks in riddles and revelation. The other answers with confidence, even when it's wrong. Is it possible we're building towers again? Digital Babels, reaching into the heavens, trying to take God's place, not with bricks, but with bytes? The sacred is not obsolete, but we treat it like an outdated operating system. Still, something in me refuses to delete it. Because even in this tangled, glowing world, I believe there's a voice that speaks deeper than algorithms. A truth that outlives every update. And maybe faith was never supposed to compete with technology. Maybe it was meant to remind us who we are when the code forgets. Signs in smoke and sulfur. In Revelation, they come riding with fire, smoke, and sulfur. It sounds like a nightmare, like the sky itself caught fire and refused to go out. But what if those elements weren't only about flames and death? What if they were meant to say something deeper, about what happens to a world that loses its center? Fire, smoke, sulfur. Fire destroys, but it also reveals. It strips everything down to its foundation. And maybe that's what truth does, too. It burns through our illusions, through comfort, through pride. It hurts, but it purifies. And when it's over, what remains is often something new, something honest. Smoke confuses. It clouds your vision, makes it hard to breathe. It lingers long after the fire is gone. That's what pain does. It stays in our minds, in our cities, in our homes. And sometimes we don't even realize we're choking until it's too late. And sulfur, it smells of rot, of something spoiled and sick. It's the scent of corruption, of hearts turned cold, of choices made over and over again without love or conscience. In ancient times, sulfur meant judgment, divine fire, the kind that falls from heaven not to light the way, but to bring reckoning. So maybe John wasn't just seeing destruction. Maybe he was seeing the consequences, the spiritual residue of a humanity that forgets its soul, of nations that choose pride over compassion, of people who turn truth into opinion and love into transaction. We want Revelation to be a future event, something we can avoid. But what if it's already happening? What if the smoke is already in our lungs? What if the sulfur is in the air, not around us, but between us? And what if the fire is the last chance to begin again, before it all turns to ash? The battle that never ends. Every generation thinks it's the last. Every war feels like the final one. Every evil, the darkest. Every failure, the end of hope. And yet, we're still here, still breathing, still choosing, still caught in the same ancient battle. It's easy to look at Revelation and see a climactic war. Heaven versus hell, angels versus demons, the righteous against the wicked. But maybe the battle isn't reserved for some future page in history. Maybe it's right now, right here. Because the war between light and darkness doesn't only rage on distant fields or in prophetic visions. It happens in hearts, in choices, in the unseen corners of our lives. I've felt it in myself. The pull between cynicism and faith, between fear and love, between revenge and mercy. Some days, I lose. Some days, I fight. Some days, I fall to my knees just to find the strength to stand again. We don't need visions of dragons to know evil is real. We see it in how we treat each other, in how we ignore the broken, in how we justify what we once swore we'd never become. But we also see goodness, in quiet acts of courage, in forgiveness that makes no sense, in people who choose compassion when hatred would be easier. And that, maybe, is the true message of Revelation. Not just doom, but decision. Not just prophecy, but participation. Because we aren't passive observers of some divine script, we're part of it. Every act of love writes a new line. Every refusal to hate adds another verse. The battle never ended. It simply changes shape. From swords to screens, from thrones to hearts, from visible armies to invisible influences whispering in the dark. But the call has always been the same. Choose the light, even when it costs you, especially when it costs you. Because light never forces. It invites, and it always waits for a yes. The invitation. Maybe all of this, prophecy, fire, symbols, fear, isn't meant to scare us. Maybe it's meant to wake us. Because if Revelation is a warning, it's also a whisper. Not from a distant judge, but from a God who still wants us close, who still calls. Even now, we are not forgotten. Even in a world spinning faster than we can understand, there is still time to remember who we are, to slow down, to listen again, to believe again, not in fear, but in grace. The battles are real. The darkness is loud, but light has never been silent. It moves in every small decision we make, in every prayer, in every hand held out to another. We were made for more than scrolling and surviving. We were made to live fully, to love deeply, to burn bright. And if you felt it, if something inside you stirred while listening, it wasn't by accident. It was an invitation, not to religion, not to dogma, but to return, to what's holy, to what's real, to what never left you. The end isn't just a conclusion. It's a beginning for those who choose it. If this touched your heart, help share this. Like, comment, subscribe, not for numbers, but so this message reaches someone else who needs it.